Lena sat by the window, gazing out at the dusky sky as the city settled into the calm of the evening. The cool breeze from the open window carried the faint scent of rain, mingling with the scent of fresh coffee. She should have been grateful for this quiet moment, yet a gnawing unease lingered in the pit of her stomach. She ran a finger along the edge of her coffee cup, its warmth providing a brief respite from the chill creeping through her bones. At 32, Lena found herself staring at a life that didn't quite feel like hers anymore. It wasn't the life she had imagined when she and Alex first met, so full of passion, laughter, and the certainty that they would always be enough for each other. They had been inseparable in their early years, their love electric, their connection undeniable. Alex had always been her best friend, her confidant, and her lover. The bond they shared had once felt unbreakable, but somewhere along the way, things had changed. The spark that once burned brightly had dimmed, leaving only the residue of old memories and unmet needs. Their marriage, once a seamless blend of intimacy and partnership, had gradually shifted into something more like a business arrangement, functional but devoid of the warmth that had once defined it. They had a child now, a beautiful son named Ethan, who had brought so much joy into their lives, but also introduced an array of challenges. The endless cycle of school runs, dinner preparations, and bedtime routines had left little room for the connection that once came so naturally. Their conversations had become more about logistics than desires, their touches more about necessity than affection. Lena couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but somewhere in the last few years, the intimacy between her and Alex had vanished, leaving a chasm between them that neither seemed to know how to cross. She had tried to ignore it at first, convincing herself it was just a phase, a result of the exhaustion that came with parenting and the mundane routine of life. But as time passed, the distance between them only seemed to grow. She loved Alex, of course. He was the father of her child, the man she had vowed to spend her life with. But now, when she looked at him, she saw a stranger. His eyes, once full of mischief and affection, now seemed distant, tired. His touch, once tender and reassuring, felt almost mechanical, as if he too was just going through the motions. And Lena, for all her love for him, couldn't ignore the gnawing emptiness that had settled in her chest. It was late one evening, as they sat together on the couch, watching a mindless television show after putting Ethan to bed, that Lena voiced the thought she had been toying with for weeks. "What if we tried something different?" she asked, her voice hesitant but determined. Alex glanced at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Different? What do you mean?" Lena shifted on the couch, unsure of how to phrase it. "I don't know, maybe we should try an open relationship." The words hung in the air between them, thick and unfamiliar. Alex stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. It wasn't the first time she had wondered aloud about their relationship, about whether they had outgrown each other or if something more was missing. But this was different. This suggestion felt bold, risky, and, in a way, desperate. Alex was silent for a long time, and Lena could feel his hesitation, his confusion. She couldn't quite meet his eyes. She wasn't even sure why she had said it. Was she searching for validation? Or was it that she truly believed this could fix them? "Lena, are you serious?" Alex finally asked, his voice low, tinged with something like disbelief. She nodded, biting her lip. "I think we're both stuck in this rut. Maybe if we open up, if we let go of the traditional boundaries, we could find something new, something that will bring us closer again. Maybe this would help us reconnect. What do you think?" Alex ran a hand through his hair, his eyes focused on the floor. The room felt colder suddenly, the air thick with uncertainty. Lena's heart beat faster as she waited for him to respond. She couldn't tell if he was processing it or if he was just trying to find the right words. "I don't know, Lena," he said finally, his voice quiet, contemplative. I guess if we're being honest with ourselves, things have been different between us for a while now. But this feels like a huge step." Lena looked at him, feeling both relief and dread wash over her. The relief came from hearing him acknowledge the truth of their situation. But the dread was rooted in knowing that once they crossed this line, there was no going back. An open relationship wasn't just a solution to a problem, it was a gamble. A leap into the unknown. "Maybe it's worth a try," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's what we need." Alex was silent for a long time, and Lena couldn't read his expression. Was he afraid? Confused? Did he truly want this? Or was he just agreeing to make her happy? She couldn't tell, but when he finally looked at her again, his eyes held something else, something that Lena hadn't expected. A spark of curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe just the willingness to try anything to break free from the growing distance between them. "All right," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "Let's try it. But we have to be clear with each other. No secrets, no lies." Lena felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety rush through her. This was it. They were going to try something that could either save their marriage or tear it apart. But she was ready to take that step, to see if it would bring them closer, or if it would reveal that the connection they once had was truly lost forever. As the days passed, they discussed the details. What would the rules be? How far would they go? There were moments of excitement as they explored the idea, but also moments of unease. There were cracks in their communication, subtle signs that they were both still holding on to something, maybe fear, maybe pride, something that kept them from fully embracing the idea. But as the tension lingered in the air between them, one thing became clear. Whatever happened, their marriage would never be the same again. The idea of an open relationship, born from the desire to reignite their fading connection, would soon test the very foundation of their love, leaving them questioning whether it was the answer to their struggles, or a deeper reflection of what they had been avoiding all along. The journey was about to begin, and neither of them knew where it would lead. Weeks had passed since Lena and Alex had agreed to experiment with an open relationship. What started as a tentative step toward rediscovery, an attempt to ignite a dying spark, had swiftly morphed into a whirlwind of chaos. They had set boundaries, agreed on rules, and yet, as the days unfolded, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was spiraling out of her control. The idea that an open relationship could bring them closer now seemed naive, like an illusion of freedom that was only exposing their raw, unhealed wounds. It had started with small steps, casual conversations about who Alex might be seeing, how she should handle her own encounters, and the unspoken tension that simmered beneath every word. At first, Lena had been curious. Alex was hesitant, but soon found himself engaged with a woman from work, someone who seemed to fill the space between them that had been so long empty. Lena had watched, initially calm, as Alex became more attentive to her, texting late into the night, spending more time at work, and casually mentioning his new connection with a certain sense of excitement in his voice. But the excitement Lena had hoped for, the thrill of breaking free from the constraints of their old life, didn't come. Instead, it was replaced by a gnawing discomfort. She had told herself that she could handle it, that the boundaries they had set would keep them from crossing any lines that might hurt their marriage. But the more Alex became absorbed in this new relationship, the more distant he became from her. They barely talked about anything meaningful anymore, their conversations reduced to logistical matters about Ethan and household chores. Lena had tried to engage with others herself. After all, the agreement was mutual. She met a few men at work events, went on dates that felt oddly detached, and flirted with the idea of experiencing the freedom she had suggested to Alex. But instead of feeling liberated, she found herself filled with guilt and self-doubt. The men she met didn't compare to Alex, and the emotional disconnection she felt with them made her long for the intimacy that was once so effortless between her and her husband. Yet, the thought of stepping away from this experiment and returning to the old rules seemed impossible. There was too much at stake now. She couldn't admit to herself that she might have been wrong. Her emotions were starting to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. She began to feel a tightening in her chest whenever Alex mentioned his time with other people, her smile becoming more forced as he spoke about his dates, his new experiences, and the excitement that radiated from him. She wasn't sure whether it was jealousy or something deeper, a fear of being replaced, of becoming invisible to the man she had spent her life with. She told herself it was temporary. It was just the price of freedom, right? It was just a phase. But as the days dragged on, those emotions, those deep primal fears, became harder to suppress. One evening, as Lena scrolled through her phone in bed, she came across a picture Alex had posted of himself and the woman from work, laughing together over drinks. She didn't recognize the place they were at, some trendy bar she hadn't heard of. They looked so happy, so at ease. The image burned into her mind, and her heart skipped a beat. She closed her phone quickly, trying to push the rush of panic down, but it was too late. The jealousy, the insecurity, the fear of losing him all hit her like a wave. This wasn't just about an open relationship anymore. This was about losing the man she had married, losing the life she had built with him. The thought of him with someone else, laughing, living in the same spaces that used to belong to them, without her was suffocating. That night, after Alex came to bed, Lena turned away from him, staring at the ceiling. She could feel his presence beside her, but the distance between them was more apparent than ever. He was so far away, lost in his own world of excitement and new connections, while she was drowning in a sea of doubts and fears. Her thoughts spiraled as she lay there, unable to sleep. Maybe I was never enough for him. Maybe this was always going to happen. I'm just scared of being alone, of losing him. Lena? Alex's voice broke through the silence. Are you okay? She stiffened, not sure how to answer. Yeah, she said softly, not turning toward him. Just tired. He didn't respond immediately, but she felt him shift beside her, his body pulling back slightly, as if he too sensed the growing chasm between them. She longed to reach out to him, to bridge that gap, but she didn't know how. What could she say? That she was struggling to breathe in the very life they had built together? That she was terrified of losing everything? In the following days, their relationship seemed to fray even more. Arguments became more frequent, their conversations colder. They had always been good at talking things through, but now even when they tried, it felt like they were speaking two different languages. Lena would voice her discomfort, her confusion, but Alex seemed increasingly indifferent. He was busy with his other connections, with the freedom he had so willingly embraced. And when she asked him about it, his responses were filled with a sense of detachment that felt like a knife to her chest. Lena, I don't understand, he said one night, his voice tinged with frustration. You wanted this. You wanted us to be free, to explore. Why does it feel like you're punishing me for it now? The accusation hit her hard, but in the pit of her stomach, she knew he was right. She had wanted this. She had pushed for it, convinced herself that it was the solution, that it was the only way they could find each other again. But now she wasn't sure. The freedom they had sought had become a prison of her own making, trapping her in a whirlwind of jealousy, insecurity, and fear. I'm not punishing you, Alex, she said, her voice shaking. I just don't know what this is anymore. I don't know if I can handle it. You're with other people and I'm supposed to just watch, smile, and be happy for you? I feel like I'm losing you. Alex sighed heavily, rubbing his forehead. Lena, you're not losing me, but you need to figure out what you want, because I can't keep doing this if it's just going to hurt you. The word stung, but Lena could feel the truth in them. She wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. The excitement of the open relationship had quickly faded, replaced by a deep sense of emotional turmoil. She wasn't sure if it was jealousy or something more, some deeper, more insidious fear that had been lurking under the surface all along. As the days wore on, Lena confided in her close friend, Julia, who had always been there for her. Julia was supportive, as she always was, but the advice she offered only added to Lena's confusion. You need to ask yourself if you really want this, Lena, Julia said one afternoon over coffee. Is this really about reigniting your marriage, or is it about avoiding something deeper? What's really at the heart of this? Lena wasn't sure how to answer. The more she thought about it, the more the question gnawed at her. Was this truly about saving her marriage, or was it a way to avoid the deeper issues that had always been there but were now coming to the surface? The realization hit her with a jolt. Maybe the open relationship wasn't the solution. Maybe it was just another distraction, another way to avoid the real conversations they needed to have. Her emotions were spiraling, and the distance between her and Alex felt more insurmountable than ever. They had both made choices, and now those choices were unraveling everything they had worked so hard to build. Lena stood at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take, unsure if there was any way back to the relationship she had once known. The open relationship, which was supposed to bring them closer, had instead exposed the deep chasm between them. Now more than ever, Lena feared that what they had might be slipping through her fingers. And yet, she didn't know how to stop it. The tension between Lena and Alex had been escalating for weeks, a quiet storm that had been brewing ever since they opened the doors to their experiment. The emotional walls they had built around themselves were now towering and unyielding, each argument only adding another brick. It wasn't just the open relationship anymore, it was everything. The years of neglect, the unsaid words, the ignored needs. It had all been creeping under the surface, festering in silence. And now, it had reached its breaking point. It started, as it always did now, with a small comment from Alex. They had been sitting on the couch, the TV playing softly in the background, neither of them really watching it. Ethan was at a sleepover, and for the first time in weeks, they had a moment of quiet. But the silence between them was oppressive, a reminder of the gap that had grown between them. Alex casually mentioned his plans for the weekend. "I think I'm going to meet Kara on Saturday. She invited me to this wine-tasting event. Should be fun." Lena's chest tightened at the mention of Kara, the woman from his work who had become a regular part of his life. She had tried to remain neutral about it, told herself she should be supportive, but the reality was different. Her stomach churned, and the familiar feeling of jealousy rose up like a tidal wave. She knew she couldn't keep pretending that it didn't bother her. "And you didn't think to ask if I had any plans?" Lena's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of everything that had been left unsaid between them. Alex looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "You're taking this all wrong, Lena. You've been going out too. We agreed on this, remember? We're both free to explore." "I know," Lena said, her voice trembling. "But this isn't about freedom anymore, Alex. It's about you being with other people, and I'm here, left behind." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Lena felt her heart pounding in her chest, the anger and hurt building, but she also felt something deeper, something raw, something broken. She was scared. She was scared of losing him, scared of the distance that had become impossible to ignore. Alex sighed and leaned back into the couch, rubbing his face. "Lena, this is exactly what I mean. You can't keep getting upset every time I go out with someone. We agreed on this. We're not in the same place anymore. I thought you understood that." The word struck her like a blow. They weren't in the same place anymore. She knew that. But what she hadn't realized was how much Alex had already distanced himself from her. The open relationship had been supposed to bring them closer, but instead, it had pushed them further apart. The connection they once shared, intimate, passionate, filled with love, had slowly been suffocated by the weight of new encounters, new experiences, and a growing emotional divide. Lena felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not now. Not when she was about to explode. She stood up abruptly, her legs shaky beneath her, her hands clenched into fists. "I don't know why I'm even doing this anymore. I don't know why I thought this would work. You've changed, Alex. And I've changed, too. We're not the same people we were 8 years ago. But this isn't us. We're drifting apart, and I don't know how to fix it." Alex's gaze softened, but his words were cold. Maybe this is just the way things are now. Maybe we're not supposed to go back to what we were. You can't just expect everything to stay the same forever, Lena. You can't force things." Lena recoiled at the finality in his voice. There it was, the truth she had been avoiding, the realization she had been too afraid to face. He had already let go. She had pushed for this experiment, this open relationship, in the hopes that it would spark something. But it had done the opposite. She had been so desperate to avoid the stagnation that had crept into their marriage, that she hadn't stopped to consider the deeper issues they had been ignoring for years. They were no longer the same people, and that truth was something neither of them had been willing to face until now. Lena's mind was spinning, her heart racing, as the weight of everything settled over her. She wasn't just angry at Alex, she was angry at herself. She had pushed for this. She had thought that opening their marriage could save them, could make them whole again. But all it had done was expose the cracks that were already there. She hadn't wanted to face those cracks, hadn't wanted to confront the fact that their love had faded long before the open relationship was ever suggested. In that moment, Lena understood the truth with painful clarity. She had never wanted freedom. Not really. What she had wanted was to avoid facing the truth about her marriage, to avoid the uncomfortable reality that maybe they had grown apart, that maybe they weren't meant to be together anymore. The open relationship had been a way to fill the void, a way to keep herself from confronting the possibility that her marriage was already beyond repair. She turned away from Alex, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. "I can't do this anymore, Alex. I can't keep pretending that this is working. I thought we could find our way back to each other, but now I see that we're too far gone." Alex didn't respond immediately. He stood there, silent, and for the first time, Lena saw the look in his eyes, a mixture of resignation and sadness. He had already known. He had already accepted that this wasn't going to work, that their marriage wasn't going to survive this. And that realization hit Lena like a punch to the gut. For the first time in years, Lena allowed herself to break down. The tears she had been holding back for so long flowed freely now, and she sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs. Everything she had feared, the loss of Alex, the loss of their family, was coming to fruition. And it was her fault. She had pushed them to this point, driven them apart in the name of something she didn't even understand. Alex didn't move. He didn't try to comfort her, didn't try to stop her tears. He just stood there, the weight of their shared history heavy between them. Lena's thoughts became a blur, her emotions flooding her with overwhelming force. She had wanted to save their marriage, to rekindle the love that had once been there. But now she realized it wasn't just the open relationship that had caused the rift. It was everything. The years of neglect, the failure to communicate, the unacknowledged issues that had always been there. And now they were beyond repair. She looked up at Alex, her voice hoarse and broken. "I'm sorry, Alex. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just didn't know what else to do." Alex looked down at her, his face unreadable. For a long moment there was silence. And then he finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "I don't think there's anything left to fix, Lena." In that moment, Lena knew that everything had changed. The love they once shared, the life they had built together, was slipping through her fingers. The choice was now hers, to hold on, to keep fighting for something that no longer existed, or to let go and face the consequences of everything they had lost. The days after the argument felt like a slow unraveling. Lena walked through each day in a haze, her mind constantly replaying the conversation with Alex, the tears, the pain. She hadn't been able to talk to him properly since that moment. There was too much left unsaid, too much hurt to address. The love they had once shared felt like a distant memory, and it was slipping further away with each passing day. The house felt different now. The walls, once warm with shared memories and laughter, now seemed cold and oppressive. They avoided each other, speaking only when necessary, their conversations curt and awkward. It wasn't the relationship she had envisioned when they had first opened the door to this experiment. She had thought they could work through their issues, grow together. But all it had done was expose a deep fracture between them that neither of them knew how to heal. Lena lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She regretted so much. The open relationship had seemed like the answer, a way to bring excitement and passion back into their marriage. But now it was clear that it had only created distance, physical, emotional, and psychological. She had wanted to revive their intimacy, but instead, it felt as if it had been stripped away, piece by piece. She thought about Alex, and the more she thought about him, the more her heart ached. She knew he was struggling too. He wasn't as indifferent as he appeared. His distant behavior was a shield, one he had put up to protect himself from the fallout of their decisions. But the truth was, he had been hurting for a long time, just as she had. The problem was, they had never acknowledged it until it was too late. Lena called her best friend, Sophie, the next morning, desperate for someone to talk to. Sophie had been a sounding board for her throughout the ups and downs of her marriage, but Lena hadn't wanted to admit the depth of her struggles until now. The weight of the situation had become too much for her to carry alone. "Lena, I don't know what to say," Sophie said softly on the phone, her voice full of concern. "I never thought it would get to this point. I always thought you two could work through anything. I don't know if we can anymore," Lena replied, her voice cracking. "I keep thinking that maybe we made a mistake. Maybe I pushed him too far. We were already broken and I thought this would fix it. But it didn't. It made everything worse." "You didn't know this was going to happen," Sophie said gently. "You were just trying to find a way to fix things, to bring back what you had." "I should have known better," Lena whispered. "I should have realized that no matter how much we tried to change things, the real issue was the fact that we stopped talking, stopped connecting. We were just going through the motions. And I didn't see it until now. I didn't see how much damage was already done." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Sophie's words hung in the air, a painful reminder of the reality Lena had been avoiding. Lena had been so focused on trying to recapture what they had lost that she hadn't stopped to ask herself why it had been lost in the first place. The answer was uncomfortable, but it was clear. The marriage had been falling apart long before the open relationship was ever on the table. "Do you think it's over?" Sophie finally asked, breaking the silence. Lena hesitated, the question weighing heavily on her chest. "I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think either of us knows what to do now." After hanging up, Lena sank into the couch, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She thought about Alex, about the life they had built together. They had a child. They had history, shared dreams and memories. But now, it felt like they were two strangers occupying the same space, each lost in their own world of confusion and regret. Alex, too, was dealing with the fallout. He had always been reluctant to talk about his feelings, but now it was becoming impossible to avoid. The distance between them was palpable, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He hadn't expected the open relationship to unravel their marriage like this, but he couldn't deny the truth. They had stopped being the couple they once were, and the damage was deep. He felt guilty for agreeing to it in the first place, but he also felt trapped by the idea that maybe it was too late to fix things. Lena had tried to talk to him a few times since the argument, but it always felt forced. When they did speak, it was like speaking to a wall. The person she had once known so intimately was now distant, closed off, and unreachable. There were moments when he seemed genuinely remorseful, but the walls he had built were too thick to break down. They had both made mistakes. Alex had been too passive, letting Lena's ideas go unchallenged, and Lena had been too focused on finding a solution to their problems without addressing the root causes. Both of them had been running from the truth, pretending that the open relationship could save them when, in reality, it had been a desperate attempt to avoid facing their issues head-on. Lena tried to reach out to him one evening, but the conversation only added to her confusion. "Alex, we need to talk," she began, her voice tentative. trying to find a way to reconnect. "I don't know what there is left to say," Alex replied, his voice flat. "It feels like we're past that point, doesn't it?" Lena's heart sank, but she couldn't back down. "No, I don't think we're past it. We've lost our way. We've both been running from the truth." Alex looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't know if we can go back, Lena. Maybe we weren't meant to. Maybe we've changed too much." The word stung, but Lena knew deep down that he was right. They had changed. They were no longer the people they had been when they first fell in love. The bond they once shared had been eroded over time, and neither of them had known how to repair it. Their attempt to rekindle that bond had only served to expose the fractures they had been too afraid to confront. Lena turned away, fighting back tears. "I don't know what to do anymore, Alex. I don't know how to fix this." Alex didn't answer. He didn't know either. Days turned into weeks, and the reality of their broken marriage began to settle in. Lena found herself withdrawing more and more, spending long hours alone, reflecting on her choices and her failures. She had to face the truth that she couldn't change the past, and the future felt uncertain. But one thing was clear. The relationship she had once fought so hard to preserve was slipping away, and neither of them had the answers to make it whole again. Both Lena and Alex had to come to terms with the consequences of their decisions. The open relationship had been an attempt to save something that was already lost, and in doing so, they had only made things worse. Now they were left with a broken marriage, broken trust, and the painful task of figuring out how to move forward, separately or together. It was unclear. What was clear, however, was that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt quieter somehow. Lena had entered a new phase in her life, a phase where she no longer sought to fix everything with a quick solution or an external fix. Instead, she was learning to sit with the discomfort, to feel the weight of the silence that now stretched between her and Alex, and to finally face the truth about herself and their relationship. It was a Sunday morning when she sat down with a cup of coffee, gazing out the window at the quiet street. The sky was overcast, and the chill in the air made it feel as though the world was on pause. She could feel the pressure in her chest, the tightness that had been there for weeks, but it wasn't panic. It was resignation, a resigned acceptance of the fact that her life had reached a point where she had to make a choice, not just for her marriage but for herself. Alex had been distant for some time, but in the quiet, Lena had come to understand that it wasn't just his distance that was the problem. It was hers too. She had been avoiding the deeper issues, distracting herself with ideas of escape, freedom, and novelty. But all of those things had only served to bring more chaos, more confusion. What she needed was not a change in the rules of their relationship, but a change in how she viewed herself and her needs. Over the past few weeks, Lena had taken time for herself, stepping back from the constant demands of parenting and her role as a wife. She had gone for long walks, meditated, and allowed herself to reflect on what she had been running from. There were many moments of clarity, moments when the fog lifted just enough for her to see her own role in the unraveling of things. She hadn't been the perfect partner. In fact, she had ignored her own dissatisfaction for so long that it had festered and ultimately exploded into a decision that wasn't grounded in love or understanding, but in fear of loss. She realized now that the open relationship had been an act of desperation, a way to escape the discomfort she had been unwilling to face. As Lena continued to reflect, she realized that the problems in her marriage had always been deeper than anything she could solve by simply changing the rules. The cracks had been there for a long time. Communication had broken down years ago. Intimacy had faded, and their lives had become routines that lacked the passion and connection they once shared. But rather than facing those issues head-on, they had both tried to run from them in different ways. Alex, through his hesitance and emotional withdrawal, and Lena, through her impulsive decisions and attempts at external fixes. The truth was, they had both been afraid of facing the reality that the marriage they had built might no longer be enough. Lena began to take responsibility for her part in all of this. She had been so focused on what she thought she needed from Alex that she had forgotten to ask herself what she needed from herself. She had neglected her own growth, her own desires, and her own understanding of what it meant to be in a partnership. She had thought that the spark of passion could be reignited through new experiences, but now she understood that the spark she was seeking wasn't something external. It was internal, something that had to be cultivated with honesty, communication, and a willingness to confront the truth. When Lena finally spoke to Alex again, it wasn't with the urgency of needing an answer, but with the calm understanding of someone who had come to terms with the situation. They sat on the couch together, the distance between them still palpable, but now there was a sense of mutual recognition in the air. The tension of the past few months hung heavily over them, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like they could at least try to talk openly. "I've been thinking," Lena began, her voice soft but steady, "about everything that's happened. And I've come to realize that I've been running from something. I've been trying to fix something without truly understanding what was broken." Alex looked at her, his face unreadable, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He, too, had been thinking about the distance, about the cracks, about how much had changed between them. He had thought that maybe the answer lay in exploring new experiences, but now he saw that the answer wasn't so simple. "I've been running too," Alex admitted after a moment of silence. "I thought maybe this open thing would solve everything, but it didn't. I thought I could disconnect from it all, ignore the problems, and focus on something else. But I was wrong. I see now that I've been pushing you away too." The weight of their words settled between them. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was something. A mutual acknowledgement of their mistakes, their flaws, and their inability to fix everything with one big gesture. It was a beginning of sorts, not of rebuilding what they had, but of understanding what had been lost and what, if anything, could be salvaged. Lena knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It wasn't about finding a quick fix or a magic solution. It was about facing the reality of their relationship and asking themselves if they were willing to put in the work to rebuild or if it was time to part ways. The open relationship had exposed deep insecurities and unspoken fears, but it had also provided an opportunity for growth. Growth that wasn't about salvaging what they had, but about understanding what had been wrong all along. As Lena walked through the quiet house, she could feel the weight of the decision before her. She could feel the ambiguity that hung in the air, the uncertainty of what would come next. But she also felt a sense of peace, a sense of knowing that she had taken the first step toward understanding herself and her marriage. She had taken responsibility for her actions and understood, in a way she hadn't before, that love wasn't about fixing everything, but about accepting the imperfections. The future was uncertain, and the ending of their story was not yet written. But one thing was clear. Lena had learned that true growth, true healing, came from within. It came from being honest, from confronting the difficult truths, and from accepting that sometimes the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. Whether she and Alex could find a way forward together was still unknown, but for the first time in a long while, Lena was at peace with whatever lay ahead. The ambiguity of love, its complexity, its unpredictability, it was all part of the journey. And Lena, though uncertain about the future, had taken the first step toward finding her way.